part of this meeting. 2 Kings chapter 6 tonight. 2 Kings chapter 6. I was talking to your preacher before the service. I know that he preaches through a lot of books, preaches series, and I preach a lot of series at our church. I'm always in at least two different series, Sunday morning and one other service. And probably about a year ago, I started preaching through, or not preaching through, preaching from 1st and 2nd Kings. And just different stories, got interested in the books. And I've probably preached, I don't know, maybe 20 sermons just scattered throughout the books of the Kings. And I look at it now and I wish that I'd started at 1 Kings 1 and preached through the books, is what I wish I'd have done. But I didn't, and now I've preached in and out of it so much, I've kind of ruined it, to be honest with you. And I wish I could go back and start over, but that's the way it is. And there's so many stories in the books of Kings that just fascinate me. I was working on a sermon today that I'll preach Sunday night in our church, and it's in 2 Kings chapter 10. You can read it later, and it's the reign of Jehu. Jehu was the king who was almost good. Jehu, there's two statements about Jehu that you probably would recognize. One is Jehu driveth furiously. And then Jehu said, come see my zeal for the Lord. And Jehu is the king who ridded Israel of Baal worship. His task was to destroy the house of Ahab. And in 1 Kings 9, or 1 Kings 10, he comes to power. And man, he kills a couple of kings. And he has 70 sons of Ahab that are killed. And then 42 he has, and I mean, he just wipes them out. And there's a story that when he goes into Samaria, where the temple to Baal worship was there that Ahab had built, he puts out a word, if you're a worshiper of Baal, then come to the temple and let's worship. And he says, if you are a worshiper of Baal, I more. He claims to be a Baal worshiper. He's not. He claims to be a Baal worshiper. And he gets all of the Baal worshipers in one place, has them all wearing the same kind of garment that he gives them, makes sure that there are no worshipers of Jehovah there, gets them all in one place under the guise that he is going to there and he's going to worship Baal with them, and then he calls in soldiers, kills them all. It's just a great story. And a little bit underhanded. I don't know that I agree with how he did that, but that's how he got rid. And I'm going to preach on that Sunday night in our church. And I've just enjoyed different stories. Well, there is a story in 2 Kings chapter 6 that intrigues me. And it's a little bit different for the end of a revival meeting, but I pray the Lord would use it. I'm going to be very intensely practical tonight, all right? Just very, very practical. And if you don't need this right now, there will come a time. There'll come a time when trouble will hit your life, and you're going to need to know how to respond to it. In 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse number 24, it came to pass after this that Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, gathered all his host and went up and besieged Samaria. There was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it, until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and the fourth part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. And as the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, help my lord, O king. And he said, if the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? Out of the barn floor, or out of the winepress? And the king said unto her, what aileth thee? And she answered, this woman said unto me, give thy son that we may eat him today, and we'll eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, give thy son that we may eat him. And she hath hid her son. And it came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman, that he rent his clothes, and he passed by upon the wall. And the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. Then he said, God do so, and more also to me, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat shall stand on him this day. But Elisha sat in his house, and the elders sat with him, and the king sent a man from before him. But ere the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, See ye how this son of a murderer has sent to take away mine head? Look, when the messenger cometh, shut the door and hold him fast at the doors, not the sound of his master's feet behind him. While he yet talked with them, behold, the messenger came down unto him, and he said, Behold, this evil is of the Lord. What should I wait for the Lord any longer? There's actually 4 stories in 2 Kings chapter 6, and all of them are fascinating stories. Sometime go home tonight, and if you read the first 7 verses of this chapter, there's a story, it's an odd story about the sons of the prophets that were out chopping wood. And one of them swung his axe, and the axe head flew off of the handle and landed in the Jordan River. Elisha just happened to be close by, and he came, and he took a stick, and he threw it into the river, and that axe head, the Bible said, began to swim. Now, I would think float, but it says that it began to swim. It just miraculously rose to the top, and they were able to get the strange story. Then in verse 8 through 12, the king of Syria is planning to attack Israel by ambush. And the way that he would do it is he would hide his soldiers on a path that was known to be traveled by Israeli soldiers. And the plan was to attack them, ambush them when they least suspected it. It was a brilliant plan, but somebody was always telling those soldiers that there's an ambush ahead. And they would go a different route. The king of Syria gets aggravated. He thinks, maybe I've got a mole in the camp. I've got a spy here, and he gets furious. And so finally somebody tells him, well, it's that prophet Elisha. He's the one that's telling them. He's the one that's ruining this plan. That's the second story. There's a third story, verse 13 through 23. The king of Syria decides, well, I'm going to capture Elisha. I'm going to make him pay for his crimes. And he sends an entire army down to Dothan, where Elisha and his servants are staying. And his servants comes out one morning, and he sees an army that is completely surrounding them. He goes back in, he tells Elisha there is an army, and what are we going to do? And Elisha prays for God to open his eyes, for him to be able to see what he can't see. He goes back out, and he sees a heavenly army, an angelic host that is encamped in all of the mountains around about them. And the servant learns that greater is he that is with us than he that is against us. Great, great story. And then we come to the fourth story. It's very intriguing. The king of Syria lays siege to Samaria, and the city gets in dire straits. All the supplies are cut off. The city is literally starving to death. Now, you've got to read the next chapter to find out how this thing ends up. There's going to be a great miracle that's going to remedy the situation, but the famine itself is a very telling story. Now I can't relate to a famine. I can't relate to a severe drought. Now, I'm not discounting that there is poverty in America, and I don't know your economic situation, but I dare say that there is no poor people in this auditorium tonight. Now, you think that you are, but come travel with me to some mission fields I've been in, and you'll discover you're really not that poor. Our problem tonight is not that we can't get enough to eat. Our problem is we won't stop eating all the food that we have. So we've never been in a famine. I've never really been hungry. I've never not known where the next meal is coming from. But the king of Syria has besieged Samaria, and it is a drastic situation. And the Bible says that it is so bad that they are eating donkeys' heads. I've never ate a donkey's head. It doesn't sound very appetizing. I've eaten some nasty things on the mission field. I've eaten some, but I've never eaten a donkey head. And then it talks about a calf of dove's dung. Now, I don't believe that they're eating dove's dung. You know what dung is, don't you? I don't need to describe that, do I? I don't think that they're eating that. I think that they're probably using that for fire, maybe for fuel. But inflation has brought the local economy to its knees. Can you imagine living in a place like Venezuela where there is no food, the currency is worthless? I've been getting an email an email from a missionary in Santiago, Chile, the last couple of weeks. And they've been having riots there. And there's a severe famine or drought there, I suppose. And in all of the grocery stores, he sent videos. You go into a grocery store and it looks like it's abandoned. There is no food anywhere. They're trying to get relief in there. They're having to go outside the city, trying to buy food. All the people in his church, none of them have food, and so he's trying to buy food for them. I've never been in that situation. I'm not an investment advisor at all, but you see commercials all the time that talks about buying gold and silver as a hedge for inflation. If we ever hit, a severe recession, then protect your wealth and your investments with gold and silver. I'm going to tell you something. Buy all that you want to. If a recession hits our economy and our economy crashes and something dire happens in America where people are starving, where people can't buy food, your gold is going to be worthless. What good is your gold going to do when you just want a loaf of bread, something to eat, all right? But we've never been there. We've never known what it is to be in survival mode. I've never missed a meal because I couldn't get any food. Now, I've missed some because I was fasting or because I was fat and trying to lose weight or because I was too busy working or whatever. But there's never been a time when there was no food in the pantry. I believe that I could probably go to our house tonight or tomorrow, and I don't know what is in the house, but I guarantee you that there is enough food in the refrigerator and in the pantry where our family could eat and eat fine for at least a solid week and not have to go to Walmart one time. I believe we could. Now, we're not going to do that. We're going to Walmart every day, okay? But it's just what we do, in fact, when I die, I want them to bury me at Walmart. That way my wife will visit me. And so that's the plan, is what it is. Huh? But now it may not be something I like. It may not be anything that I'm in the mood for. But you know what I have started liking? I have started in the last 6 or 7, and this is probably not healthy, I don't know, but I have gotten to where I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I just love it. I have peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day for lunch. It'd be fine with me. Now, here's what I'm saying. We've got plenty. We've got plenty. But they're in such a shape that a donkey's head is going for 80 pieces of silver. Now, just by comparison, they sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. So I'm telling you, and I'm laying the groundwork that this city is in trouble. It's in trouble. And what's going to be demonstrated in this story is how different people react when they're in trouble. Just a few weeks ago, we had a lady, I was at the church, and a lady pulled into the parking lot, and she got out, and she'd been crying. She was very distraught. And so this lady tells me a story there in the parking lot. Her daughter had died, a grown daughter had died, and left her in charge with a special needs child, and her husband was not around, wasn't helping, and it had been 4 months down the road. She was still trying to cope with the grief and the burden of everything, and she was in dire straits. Here was a lady that was in a lot of trouble. She wanted help, and she didn't know where to get it from. Now maybe your trouble is not as dire. Maybe your trouble is not like somebody else's trouble. But this year, somebody in this room is going to get news from a doctor, and it's going to be trouble. Just found out today, a young man in our church just found out that he has cancer. Just incredible, You never dreamed that. So it might be family trouble. It might be financial trouble. Churches go through trouble. Marriages go through trouble. But what are you going to do when trouble hits? There's 4 responses. I want you to see them. I'll hurry. First of all, I want you to notice in this story that when trouble hits, some people automatically run to other people. Look at verse 26. As the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, Help my Lord, O king. Now, I'm sure this lady's not the only one that is hurting, but she's speaking for the whole city. She has a family there, and there is nothing left, and now she is an emotional wreck. And she comes and she cries out to the king because surely he could come up with some kind of solution. He's the one that's in leadership. He's supposed to have the answers. He's supposed to help fight off the Syrians. And maybe he could pass a law. Maybe he could order rations. He's got to find a way to get supplies into the city. So she desperately needs some help. And her first response is to run to the king. It is to look to other people to help her. Here's what she finds out. She finds out how feeble other people really are when it comes to helping you. The lady that stopped by our church, she was in trouble, and I felt so inadequate to help her. Saying I'll pray for you was not going to solve her problems. And some people have the idea, my dad will always be there to bail me out, or my preacher, or my friend, or my rich uncle. And this lady goes to the king because you can't go any higher than that. So look at his response in verse 27. He said, if the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? He said, woman, I can't help you. If God doesn't help you, then I can't. This problem is too big even for me. You're going to have to look somewhere else for your help. You know, there will come a time when the doctor doesn't have an answer. There will come a time when your parents don't have an answer. There will come a time when your pastor doesn't have an answer. And I know that God gives insight and wisdom to others, and we seek for counsel. I understand that. But you better not put your trust in man. We help each other, but we don't lean on each other. We lean on God is what we do. There have been people sit in my office and told me a sordid tale of all the problems that were running, and I shook my head and said, I'll pray. I can't fix this. I can't solve this. Look at verse 30. Came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman that he rent his clothes, and he passed by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. He is in as bad a shape as she is. He is just as feeble as she is. And we fall into the trap. I'll just call my preacher. I'll just call my psychologist. I'll just call my best friend. And if they can't help me, then I'll pray. Hey, I got a better idea. Why don't you pray first? Why don't you call on God first? Maybe He will use people to help you, but why not call on God first? In verse 32, it talks about Elisha. It says, but Elisha sat in his house. I'll talk about Elisha in a minute. I think it is there by contrast. He's sitting there. It is a picture of peace. He's not frazzled. He's not frantic. He's not frustrated. He's in the same city. He's in the same famine. He's in the same situation, but he is at peace. There are some people, they automatically run to other people. They don't have a relationship with God. And they've got to lean on somebody else. Secondly, some people, when they are in trouble, automatically run to people. Sometimes there are others who automatically ruin people. Look at verse 28. The king said unto her, what aileth thee? And she answered, this woman said unto me, give thy son that we may eat him today, and we'll eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, give thy son that we may eat him. And she hath hid her son. Now the king is frustrated and he's angry. And he says, woman, what aileth thee? How are you in any worse condition than anybody else? We're all in this same thing together. So why are you complaining to me? We all are in trouble. And she tells this horrible story about eating her own child. I can't even fathom that. I've read stories of men stranded on an island and resorting to cannibalism just to survive. I don't know. I don't believe I could do that. No, I don't know. I think I would just rather die than resort to cannibalism. But even still, I can't imagine. I can't imagine eating your own child. That's what they've done. And not only that, she's not only eaten her own child, she wants and is willing to eat another child. Well, that's bizarre to me. She's in trouble. Now get this. She has taken the life of another person to help her in her trouble. Do you know that some people, when they get in trouble, that they are content to hurt other people to get out of their own trouble? There are people tonight that will steal from you to ease their financial troubles. They would hurt you financially if it would help them get ahead financially. There are people that would walk over you, that would trample over you. They would cause you to lose your job if it would help them to get a promotion at the company. They would lie and hurt you to help their station in life. There's single mothers who have gotten pregnant and decided to abort their baby to get out of the trouble that they've gotten themselves in. Isn't this what this mother has done? Isn't this the same thing as abortion? She murders her own child for her own survival. It's exactly what abortion is. David committed adultery with Bathsheba. She got pregnant. And David is now in trouble. And David had Uriah, you know the story, he had Uriah come home and over this scheme had Uriah murdered to get him out of trouble. Queen Jezebel, she stole Naboth's vineyard and then had him killed to save herself the trouble. Absalom wants the throne. He wants to usurp his authority. He wants to dethrone his own father David, and he is willing to send an army and to kill David in order to get what he wants. There are people that will hurt other people when they are in trouble. They'll strike out, they'll lash out, they'll hit back. There are men tonight who have made decisions that they knew was wrong, and they knew that it's going to hurt their family, but they wanted what they wanted, and they wanted to get out of trouble. There are pastors tonight who have hurt a church and hurt a lot of people because they stole money, or they had an affair, or they abused their authority somehow. There are some people that will ruin other people to get out of trouble. Lot. He wanted to make his life better, wanted to make money. More concerned raising back cattle than he was raising children. Moved his family down to Sodom. We ended up hurting them in that move. I think about Elimelech. Famine hits, moves his family to Moab for 10 years, loses 2 boys down there. Ends up hurting his family, just trying to get out of trouble. And see, we sit in church, in Calvary Baptist Church, and we say, boy, I would never do anything like that. I'm going to tell you something. You better not put any confidence in your flesh. I'm going to tell you, there's no telling the depth that you would go when the pressure's put on you. Hold your finger right here. Go to Leviticus chapter 26 tonight. Leviticus 26. We okay tonight? Leviticus 26. Just very practical. Boy, here's a couple of verses that are just... You read it and you think, man, can this possibly be? Leviticus 26, verse 27. And if you will not for all this hearken unto me, but walk contrary unto me, then I will walk contrary unto you also in fury. And even I, will chastise you 7 times for your sins, and ye shall eat the flesh of your sons, and the flesh of your daughters shall you eat. There is no telling how low you will go if you take your eyes off of God. There's no telling the decision that you will make. There's no telling the selfish direction that you'll go if you get your eyes off of God. Look at Deuteronomy 28. Look at Deuteronomy 28. In Deuteronomy 28, verse 49. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, or swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Verse 52, he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest throughout all thy land. He shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters. I can't imagine literally eating the flesh of my children, but you probably can't imagine a lot of other things that you're capable of. And God is saying that you better obey me and you better keep my commandments, because if you get away from me, it'll take you farther than you ever dreamed. There are some people, when they get in trouble, they ruin other people. Come back to the story tonight. There are some people that run to people. There are some people that ruin other people. Thirdly, there are some people, when they get in trouble, they automatically reproach other people. Look at verse 30, 2 Kings 6, verse 30. It came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman, that he rent his clothes, he passed by upon the wall. And the people looked, and behold, he has sackcloth within upon his flesh. 30 times in the Bible, you read about somebody rending their clothes. And every time it's always one of two things. One, it's either in repentance, or two, it's in distress, anger. So here he rends his clothes. So I wonder if God's got a hold of his heart and he's repenting, or I wonder if he's angry at God. But look at verse 31. Then he said, God do so and more also to me, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat shall stand on him this day. He's angry. And so the first thing he does is he accuses Elisha being the problem. I've got to blame somebody. So I'm going to blame all the problems of the city on Elisha. Let me ask you a question. How is Elisha at blame for what the Syrians are doing? It's not the preacher's fault. But I'm going to get the preacher, because I wouldn't be in this mess if it wasn't for the preacher. Yeah, he's not the only one that's ever said that. Yeah. Reproach other people. Hey, let me show you quickly who people blame. Look at Exodus 16. Turn there with me. Exodus 16. I'll show you who you could blame for all of your troubles. First, some people blame the preacher. Exodus 16, verse 2. The whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the children of Israel said unto them, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full, for ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Oh, come on. Really? Is that really why he brought you out? It was an elaborate trap. I'm going to get you out here so I can kill you all. Huh? Some people have that mentality. We're in this situation because of your poor leadership. That preacher, that Sunday school teacher, that youth leader, that deacon. Yeah. Did you know there are people that will put their kids in our Sunday school class, and if their kids don't turn out right, it becomes the Sunday school teacher's fault. I told our church the other night, I said, look, if you put your kids in our church, Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, every time the doors are open, we have them for about 5 hours a week. There's 168 hours in a week. We have them about 2.5% to 3% of the time. You got them the rest of the time. We don't even have them in a week the amount of time they go to school in a day. They sleep more every night than we have them for a week. They watch more TV in a day than we have them for the week. They probably watch more social media in a day than we. So how is it our fault? Right? Does that make sense to you? Don't blame us. No. Look at Exodus 17. Exodus 17. Verse 1. All the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of sin after their journeys, and they pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. Well, I wonder whose fault that is. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why chide you with me? Wherefore do you tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted there for water. And the people murmured against Moses and said, wherefore is this that thou hast brought us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? Now it's his fault that there's no water in the wilderness. I mean, you really think he brought them out here to die? I had a man tell me about a year ago, a guy was mad at our church. He told me I was the cause of every problem that he had. I'm not, but that was in his mind. If you're in a leadership position, you're going to get blamed for a lot of stuff. It comes with the territory. Some people blame the preacher. Look in Genesis 3. If you can't blame the preacher, maybe you can blame your partner. Look at Genesis 3 and verse 10. He, Adam, said, I heard the voice in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked and hid myself. And he said, who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree, wherefore I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? And the man said something that every one of us has said, the woman whom thou gavest me. It's that woman. And really, God, it's your fault because you're the one that gave her to me. If I hadn't married her, I'd have just been just fine. Now, preacher, you don't know the man I married. You don't know what I have to live with every day. Huh? Now, I know every marriage in this church is perfect. I know that. But you don't know how hard he is to live with. And he probably is an ogre. He probably is a jerk. I understand that. But you just don't know what it's like to have to put up with her. And my partner is who it is. Look in 1 Samuel 15. 1 Samuel 15. If you can't blame the preacher, if you can't blame your partner, maybe you can just blame the people. 1 Samuel 15, verse 20. Saul said unto Samuel, yea, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and have gone thy way which the Lord hath sent me, and have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites, but the people took of the spoil, sheep and oxen, chief of the things which should have been utterly destroyed. They made me do it, whoever they is. I told our young people the other night, I said, if you follow somebody off of a bridge, that's your fault. If you walk into sin following some idiot, that's your fault. Some people always blame the way that they were brought up or the school I had to go to or lived on the other side of the tracks, the part of town. No, listen, they did it. They made me do it. They led me astray. They got me in trouble. No, we all adults, man. You got to own up to your own problems. Look at John chapter 9. One more here real quick. If you can't blame the preacher, and if you can't blame your partner, if you can't just blame the people, maybe you could blame your parents. Look at John 9. John 9, verse 1, Jesus passed by, saw a man which was blind from his birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin? Now just catch the mentality behind this. This man or his parents. That's the only two alternatives. Either he did this, or maybe his parents sinned, and he's suffering because of his parents. Now listen to me. I know that none of us knows what goes on behind closed doors. And we could have homes even right here in this church. And I can say this because I've never been in any of your homes and I don't know anything about you, all right? But we can have homes right here in this church, and if you knew the fightings and the screams and the insults that goes on behind closed doors, it would shock us. Maybe so. And you may be able to say, you don't know how my dad treats me. You don't know how I was raised. You don't know what I had to put up with. But God gives you a free will. And you can decide how you're going to live. And if you flop for God, that's your fault. God could have put you in a different home, but He didn't. And you can live for God and you can do right even in a dysfunctional home. And I wonder tonight who you're in the habit of blaming for all your troubles. And I'm not denying that others can do things to hurt you, and what others do can affect you. And I'm not denying that sometimes you're forced to pay for somebody else's mistakes, but you can't go through life just blaming somebody else for all of my trouble. You'll never get any help that way. You'll never be able to own up to your mistakes. You'll never be able to go on if you're always just shoving the blame off on somebody else. Amen. So we come back to our strange story, 2 Kings 6. Some people, the only thing they do is run to people. Some people ruin people. They hurt people. Some people reproach other people. Here's the fourth one. Some people, when they're in trouble, they just rest in God. In verse 32. But Elisha sat in his house. Now here is a man who's in trouble. He is surrounded by dire problems. He's sitting in his house. He's the picture of peace. What he's going to say in these two verses is this evil, everything that's happening around us, all this trouble that Samaria in, it is of God's doing. God has a plan. This is not the result of a decision that I've made. I've not brought this upon myself with sin or foolishness. This is of God. I'm going to turn to God. Look at chapter 7 and verse 1. Then Elisha said, Hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, Tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria. Now, without explaining all of this, basically what he said is that tomorrow the Lord's going to fix all this. Tomorrow the answer is coming. Now, let me ask you a question. How did he know what was going to happen tomorrow? I'll tell you how. God told him. In the midst of trouble, he has been talking to God. And God gave him assurance. And when you're in trouble, you can't run to other people. And other people can't bail you out. You can't lash out. You can't hurt people. You can't blame other people. But what you can do is you can get close to God. You can get close enough to God where you can hear him speak to you. To be able to say that God's hand is in this, God is up to something, and I'm going to just trust God. He's in the same trouble that everybody else is in. And he's sitting there in peace. In verse 32, Elisha sat in his house, and the elders sat with him. The elders have found somebody who's at peace, somebody who's not falling apart, and they said, we're just going to sit here with him. And some people respond by withdrawing themselves. We're just going to pull ourselves into a shell, and we're going to cut ourselves off from godly people. But can I tell you that you need one another? You need the support of a church. You need strength from other believers. You need to find somebody who knows God and get as close to them as you possibly can. Be around people that can get a prayer through, people that can give wise counsel. Amen. I'm just going to rest in God. I've been in communication these last 2 weeks with a missionary on a field I'll not mention where. And over the course of the last 3 years, this missionary has probably been in the worst mission situation that I've ever heard of in all of my ministry. It has been nothing but trouble upon trouble upon trouble. He goes to a field where another missionary has made the greatest mess of any missionary that I've ever met. And he walks through the field and walks right into this. I am talking, it's unreal. Civil lawsuits, criminal lawsuits, just unbelievable. He's facing trouble in his ministry, and none of it is his fault. None of it. It has threatened his ministry. It has threatened the churches that he's trying to start. And he very easily could have taken any of these responses, and we would have said he would have been justified. But I have watched this missionary out of our church for 3 years just trust God. And said, I can't see what God's doing, but I'm going to trust him anyway. And he's not falling apart. He's not frantic. He's not lashing out. He's not striking back. He's not mad at God. He's not frantic for somebody to fix it for him. He's just trusting God, and he's watching God just turn that thing around. I don't know what happens in your life, but trouble will come. And the question is, what are you going to do when trouble hits? You can't ruin relationships. You can't become a bitter, angry person. You can't walk away from God. You can't abandon the church. You can't get ulcers and anxiety attacks. And no. You can say, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to rest. I know that He'll take care of this, and I'm just going to trust God with this trouble. And just watch God turn this thing around. I love your church, and I love your preacher. And I think you've got great days ahead of you. Maybe stormy days. Every church is doing something that God does. I could tell you stories. Your preacher could tell you stories. Brother Darius could tell you stories. Maybe there's trouble ahead. I don't know. The next phone call could change your life. But what are you going to do? You ought to just trust, just rest in Him. And say, Lord, this is bigger than me. I trust you to take care of it. Would you bow your heads with me tonight? Very practical tonight, very practical. And I pray that if you need this, that God would speak this help to your life. Heavenly Father, thank you for this story. So many strange stories in the book of Kings, very practical stories. You know what's ahead, we don't. And I pray that you'd help us, Lord, that in these days of peace and calm, to develop that relationship, that walk with you, to cultivate that closeness with you, so that when trouble comes, we know how to respond. We don't have to fall apart. We don't have to get frantic. We don't have to lash out at somebody else, find somebody to blame, hurt our family and relationships, but just to be able to take it to you and lay it at your feet and to trust you with how it turns out. I pray that you be with Calvary Baptist Church. I pray that this year that they have will be the greatest year that they've ever had. I pray that you save people in this building. I pray that you bring people into this church that they can minister to and people that they can minister with. I pray that they come to church and they're encouraged, they're excited because they see the hand of the Lord in this place. Bless this preacher and bless his family. Keep them encouraged in you, I pray. In Jesus' name and amen.
Stand to our feet, but all stay put. Let's all stand to our feet, but all stay put.